forward. Okay. Let's kill the audio. Okay, so thanks Sean. Thanks Nicola for Tim for organising and inviting me to be in this show again this year. It's a real pleasure. So what I'm going to be talking about is, I guess, my work, but also been thinking a bit about how light and dark maybe sort of influences the work and how it's almost like relevant in that. It's going to be a bit, I guess, rather nerdy and scientific, but hopefully I think there's some sort of quite poetic ideas. So it's a bit of experiments, but hopefully you won't run away screaming. So I guess what my work is basically about is trying to explore the sorts of ingredients that basically nature uses to create living things, but using computers rather than, sort of chemicals and, sort of like the things that nature actually uses, using code in a computer to create the same sorts of processes, the same sorts of relations between different ingredients, but in a computer simulated version of it. So what you're sort of seeing on this video, which is actually a sort of slight variation of the piece, if you have a look in the sort of like the old Victorian sort of viewer thing, there's like a sort of three-dimensional version of sort of this like variant on this system. It's basically a quite simple computer algorithm of almost like simulating cell splitting, cells growing, and just trying to explore what sort of structures, what sort of things emerge, what things happen, and also how do you work with this creatively? So how do you, rather than just letting it do just random things or selecting things by almost like rules of nature, like sort of survival of the fittest, things like that, if I'm trying to sort of influence the system, so I'm trying to sort of like choose things, direct things, what we always call survival of the intriguing, things that I'm interested in, I'm trying to actively steer. So I'm not interested in doing just like a scientific experiment, I'm interested in me being very much part of the loop, part of the system. What sort of things can you create? What sort of thing? So I guess one of the things is almost like, light and dark. How is that sort of related to this? And so one idea, I think, is almost like how fundamental, really deeply fundamental light and dark are to any form of life. So not just like the obvious things like photosynthesis and things like that. But I guess one of the deep rules from science and physics is the idea that disorder always increases. And in any system, basically it's saying either the amount of disorder in a system stays the same or it increases, or entropy increases over time. And one of the big, almost philosophical questions about that is, well, how can you ever end up with life? How can you go from a universe that doesn't have life to a universe that does have life, when life seems to be the opposite of disorder? That it's almost like, how can you actually go from a lifeless universe to one that life has emerged in? And the idea is, or the argument that some physicists have got about how you can do that, is almost you can create islands of order within a disordered universe. So basically, almost like islands of order, which where a living thing can be, that has to almost create more disorder somewhere else. And for these sorts of islands of order to start happening, what you need is what's called energy gradients. You need areas of space where you have lots of energy, particularly heat or light. And basically hot things are brighter light. And dark areas as well. And you have to have these steep gradients between the things to be able to drive these islands of order in this disordered universe. So I think it's quite a poetic idea. It's almost like imagine like water. If you have no gradients, you just have still water, it doesn't do anything. If you have a small gradient, small incline of water, the water just flows smoothly down the gradient. It's easy to describe, it's not doing anything particularly interesting, it's very predictable exactly what happens. But as that gradient gets steeper and steeper, you eventually reach a point where any little disturbance, any little perturbation becomes almost like a feedback system. It increases. It becomes, you get whirls and eddies and turbulence and all sorts of rich, complex structures just in the water going down a slope, as long as that slope is steep enough. So it's almost like the turbulent water coming down a mountain stream, as opposed to the smooth water going in almost like a the gradient's gentle. And basically that idea is almost like really fundamental. The idea that with a steep enough gradient, that you get this feedback effect and areas of structure, like the turbulent eddies and whirls, can start to be created. And the idea is basically just that's what can become life. Because you can start ending up with areas of order and areas of disorder. So what you need to create that is, what I was saying, like areas of light, like for the sun, and areas of dark and relatively cold, like on the earth. And it has to be steep gradients, so it's not just dark, but dark and light closely associated with each other together. And I guess that's the sort of ideas I'm trying to almost like explore in the work. It's trying to create systems where they're almost like deliberately these steep gradients, deliberately looking at things where almost like if you make the system too gentle, nothing happens. It's very predictable. There's the cells will grow, but it'll just be a ball of cells doing nothing particularly interesting. Push this system too far, and it just goes out of control. It just starts almost like pulling itself apart, almost like a too steep mountain stream. But somewhere between the two, they always get the gradient just about right, the amount of feedback in the system right. And hopefully you start getting things like this sort of interesting, I think, rich, unexpected behaviour starting to happen. So it's almost like saying light and dark. I think it's utterly almost necessary thing for life, and it's almost like the ideas I'm sort of thinking about it, sort of trying to explore it directly in works. Okay, that's.
So again, there will be a chance when the performance is setting up to have a chat with people. If you'd like to ask Andy some more questions, then feel free. I'm afraid we need to move on to the next. So I believe now we come to artists.